night the ladies get on a Zoom call, and some of the same players that said, yeah, we'll authorize a strike, now those same players are saying, maybe we should take the deal.
In the ruthless, high-pressure arena of corporate labor battles, there exists a chilling principle that every seasoned power broker understands instinctively. If you enter a boardroom, stare down a circle of hardened billionaires, and threaten to torch their billion-dollar enterprise, you cannot be posturing. You must be fully prepared, strategically, mentally, and financially, to follow through and endure the fallout if the entire structure implodes. The moment your adversary detects even the slightest uncertainty, a flicker of doubt, a crack in solidarity, the confrontation is effectively finished. You don't merely lose bargaining power, you are dismantled, outmaneuvered, and left without the leverage you believed you controlled. Over the last several months, the WNBA Players Association has operated as if they possessed the upper hand, pointing to their overwhelming December authorization of a league-wide strike and riding the commercial surge surrounding Caitlin Clark's arrival as evidence of strength. They assumed that threatening to derail what could be the most anticipated season in the history of the sport would force ownership to cave to demands that include a 27.5% share of gross revenue. Instead of scrambling, however, ownership remained composed and calculated. There was no visible panic, no dramatic concession, just patience. Rather than reacting emotionally, the investors signaled that they were willing to withstand a shutdown, effectively betting that time and financial endurance favored their side in this escalating standoff. Now, with the unforgiving March 10th deadline looming, the atmosphere has shifted dramatically, and what once looked like confidence inside the players' ranks is morphing into anxiety as many begin confronting the stark possibility that a prolonged shutdown would hit their personal finances far harder than anticipated. The leverage they believed was ironclad suddenly feels uncertain, and doubts about strategy and leadership are surfacing in locker rooms across the league. To understand the tension building beneath the surface, you have to revisit December, when the union overwhelmingly authorized a strike amid surging attendance, historic TV numbers, and the cultural momentum fueled by Caitlin Clark's rookie season. Emotions were running high, years of frustration over salaries, travel standards, and perceived respect created a combustible backdrop. And when leadership requested strike authority, many players viewed the vote as a show of solidarity, a symbolic display of unity meant to strengthen their negotiating position. But in the technical, unforgiving structure of collective bargaining law, authorizing a strike is not symbolism. It is a binding escalation that transfers enormous tactical power to union leadership and commits players to real economic risk if talks collapse. What felt like a morale-boosting statement became a high-stakes commitment with tangible consequences. As negotiations intensify, the psychological strain is mounting. Players are weighing principle against paychecks, unity against uncertainty, and long-term structural gains against immediate financial survival. That tension, between conviction and consequence, is what is now driving the unease spreading through the league, as both sides brace for a showdown that could redefine the balance of power in women's professional basketball.
Their mind, since it seems that some players have finally realized, I gave up all my leverage when I authorized the strike. Players, as soon as you gave the executive committee all the power to strike
in that single vote, they effectively and irrevocably handed away their individual bargaining power, stepping straight into the harsh reality of union power dynamics that so often leave everyday athletes exposed. The uncomfortable truth is the enormous, nearly impossible to close financial divide separating union leadership from the typical WNBA roster player. The league's executive committee is largely made up of its highest paid, most financially secure superstar veterans, global names with lucrative endorsement portfolios and business ventures that stretch far beyond their league contracts. Figures such as Nneka Agwamike and Breanna Stewart command multi-million-dollar sponsorship agreements with major international brands, maintain broad investment holdings, and even possess ownership stakes in ventures like Unrivaled. For them, absorbing the loss of a season's salary while waiting out billionaire owners in pursuit of a landmark 27% revenue split is a calculated gamble they can comfortably sustain. their financial exposure simply does not mirror that of the majority. Meanwhile, roughly 80% of the league consists of rotational contributors, defensive anchors, and early career players whose livelihoods depend almost entirely on their base salaries to cover mortgages, off-season development, and family expenses. By approving strike authorization, those players effectively transferred decision-making authority to a leadership group insulated by wealth. Now, with the March 10th deadline approaching like a falling blade and the prospect of lost paychecks and suspended health benefits becoming alarmingly real, frustration is boiling over among role players who question why they are being asked to jeopardize housing security and financial stability for revenue gains that may not meaningfully benefit them for years to come. What began as private disagreement has now erupted beyond closed-door meetings and spilled into full public view, laying bare the deep and increasingly hostile divisions running through the union's core. In high-stakes corporate standoffs like this, ownership groups don't simply react to formal statements. They deploy seasoned strategists, behavioral analysts, and financial experts who dissect every interview, every quote, every hint of hesitation from the opposing side. Official press releases are background noise to them. What they hunt for are fractures, signals of dissent, signs that unity is eroding. They study tone, body language, and wording to identify the pressure points. That's why the recent candid remarks from veteran guard Lexie Brown carry such weight. Her willingness to publicly question the direction of leadership is not just another opinion. It represents a visible crack in what was supposed to be a solid front. In negotiations of this magnitude, even a single prominent voice breaking ranks can function like structural damage to a ship's hull, precisely the kind of vulnerability ownership has been patiently waiting to leverage.
Lexie Brown's fed up with the executive committee. Lexie Brown is one of those players that said, no, I'm not authorizing a strike.
Lexie Brown has reached a breaking point with the executive committee, and she is now publicly acknowledging that the roster is far from unanimous, dismantling the carefully maintained image of total solidarity. In any labor dispute, cohesion is the workforce's greatest asset, and once that perception cracks, leverage begins to erode. When a respected veteran like Lexie Brown signals that she is hesitant to greenlight a walkout, she effectively gives voice to the anxious majority, players who may fear backlash inside team environments but quietly worry about safeguarding their next paycheck. Many of them are less focused on long-term percentage splits and more concerned with immediate financial security. Ownership undoubtedly took note as her comments circulated widely online, interpreting them as confirmation that sustained silence and deadline pressure were generating internal strain. From a negotiation standpoint, delaying meaningful engagement can be a calculated tactic: tighten the calendar, reduce clarity, and allow uncertainty to magnify stress within the opposing side. Reports indicate that owners structured the timeline so that even if a verbal understanding is reached by March 10th, any delay in formal ratification until March 31st would compress league operations into a narrow 13-day window to organize contracts, free agency decisions, training logistics, and scheduling for April. Such a condensed framework creates enormous logistical pressure, particularly during free agency, where timing is critical and uncertainty can suppress player mobility. Whether intentional or simply procedural, the effect is the same. The shorter the runway, the weaker the bargaining flexibility for players navigating contract negotiations. From a negotiation standpoint, delaying meaningful engagement can be a calculated tactic: tighten the calendar, reduce clarity, and allow uncertainty to magnify stress within the opposing side. Reports indicate that owners structured the timeline so that even if a verbal understanding is reached by March 10th, any delay in formal ratification until March 31st would compress league operations into a narrow 13-day window to organize contracts, free agency decisions, training logistics, and scheduling for April. Such a condensed framework creates enormous logistical pressure, particularly during free agency, where timing is critical and uncertainty can suppress player mobility. Whether intentional or simply procedural, the effect is the same. The shorter the runway, the weaker the bargaining flexibility for players navigating contract negotiations.
The WNBA draft will be held on April 13th. It will be the wild, wild west of WNBA free agency in the offseason. It would be nuts. It would also
It would resemble absolute chaos across the league's open market, a frantic scramble rather than a measured negotiation period. To understand the severity of a 13-day rebuild, you have to examine what it would mean for an athlete's mindset and financial security. If free agency were squeezed into a hurried 4-day stretch immediately before the draft and the start of training camp, meaningful bargaining power would practically disappear. Under normal circumstances, top players spend weeks traveling, meeting front offices, comparing competing proposals, and having attorneys dissect the fine print of complex, multi-year agreements. That deliberate process allows them to create bidding pressure and protect their long-term interests. In a rushed April framework, however, reflection and strategy would give way to urgency. Front offices could present firm, short-fuse proposals, effectively decide-now deals, leaving agents minimal room to counter before teams pivot to other available talent. When timelines shrink that dramatically, the dynamic shifts from collaborative negotiation to survival mode. Accept immediate financial security or risk entering camp unsigned, uncertain about salary, benefits, or roster stability. The psychological weight of that scenario, compressed decisions, limited options, and careers hanging on rapid choices, would be immense for players trying to balance livelihood, health coverage, and professional longevity all at once. Ownership has constructed a high-pressure environment in which anxiety alone could drive decision-making, counting on players to prioritize immediate roster security within the booming Caitlin Clark-fueled marketplace over prolonged collective demands. Many athletes now fear that urgency around limited openings and condensed timelines could push teammates to accept whatever terms are presented simply to guarantee employment. Critics argue the union's executive committee placed members in an increasingly precarious position without a clearly communicated contingency plan, while continuing to press for a 27% share of gross revenue even as a large portion of the league remains unsigned and uncertain about benefits during this unstable window. In high-stakes industries, when workers feel their short-term financial protection is at risk, influence often shifts toward representatives focused on individual outcomes. In professional sports, that figure is the agent, whose fiduciary responsibility is not to the collective, but to maximize compensation, security, and opportunity for each specific client. Agents are incentivized to move quickly, close deals, and eliminate uncertainty, especially in compressed markets. As tensions rise, that dynamic can create friction between collective strategy and individualized negotiation, leading to a subtle but powerful realignment of influence, where player representation begins steering decisions more assertively than union leadership, signaling a potential shift in who truly holds sway during the most volatile stretch of talks.
Tuesday's meeting, a group of more than 10 agents representing players of varying standing sent out their own letter to union leadership, offering to help in whatever way might be necessary to get a deal done. I think the number of players...
Reports suggest that more than 10 influential sports agents formally reached out to union leadership offering to help facilitate a resolution, an extraordinary development in the tightly controlled and politically sensitive arena of collective bargaining. Agents rarely insert themselves directly into league-wide negotiations unless internal pressure has reached a boiling point. When representatives across multiple salary tiers and talent levels bypass normal channels to engage leadership head-on, it signals that their phones are lighting up with anxious clients seeking immediate clarity about paychecks, housing provisions, and job security. Players worried about mortgages, benefits, and roster certainty are naturally turning to the people legally obligated to protect their individual interests. That outreach can be interpreted as a profound expression of frustration with the current strategy, particularly toward prominent figures such as Nneka Ogwumike and Breanna Stewart, who sit at the center of union leadership. From the agent's perspective, their fiduciary duty is clear: safeguard each client's short-term financial stability and career trajectory. If they believe negotiations are jeopardizing those priorities, they may pursue parallel conversations, apply public pressure, or encourage clients to reconsider prior strike authorization. Such coordinated involvement does not automatically dismantle collective leverage, but it undeniably reshapes the power dynamics, introducing a parallel channel of influence that can complicate unity and force leadership to recalibrate quickly in order to prevent further erosion of trust. From one perspective, ownership never needed dramatic confrontation. By enforcing a firm deadline and outlining the operational chaos of an empty season, they applied pressure and allowed internal tensions to intensify on their own. Deadlines in labor negotiations are powerful precisely because they convert abstract demands into immediate economic consequences. Players who initially supported a strike amid emotional momentum are now confronting the tangible realities of missed salaries, delayed free agency, and personal financial strain. The surge of revenue and visibility driven by Caitlin Clark undeniably reshaped the league's economics, but estimating how much leverage that momentum truly provides in collective bargaining is complex. Veteran leaders may have believed that heightened popularity strengthened their negotiating position, while many rank-and-file players are more sensitive to short-term risk exposure. Whether that miscalculation amounts to malpractice or simply reflects the inherent gamble of labor strategy depends on one's view of risk tolerance and timeline. Transformative gains often require brinkmanship, yet brinkmanship only works if solidarity holds under pressure. The reported involvement of multiple agents does not automatically equal surrender, but it does indicate strain within the coalition. Agents are obligated to prioritize individual clients, and their coordinated outreach suggests concern about immediate stability rather than long-term structural wins. That dynamic can dilute collective resolve, though it can also force